It was the second week of March. I'd been collecting eggs since Imog in hopes of making an Ostara tree. I took a look at the pile I'd collected. This seems more than enough. And so I took them indoors and prepared to craft. It had been 3 years since I'd made my last Ostara tree. And though I paint eggs each year, last year I decided to just hang my eggs on a little pink tree instead. For this year's tree, I decided to paint my eggs pink, green and yellow. Green for growth, renewal and Mother Earth. Pink for love, gratitude and the beautiful plum blossoms I always enjoy around this time. Yellow for joy, abundance and the returning warmth of the sun. The paints I'd used this year were quite thin. I had to make several coats to colour them. They didn't look evenly painted like last year's, but it's the honouring that's important. Having coloured 24 eggs, 8 of each colour, I decorated the eggs with symbols of sun and earth, renewal and rebirth, growth and fertility, love and creativity. The dove, symbolic of peace, love, and purity, is a very dear birdie to me. It is a symbol of alignment and much joy, for mine own memories with the dove are some of the happiest in this life. When admiring one of the finished eggs, I accidentally poked another with my wet paintbrush. When the unexpected happens, it's often a gift from the divine. I intuitively began to paint a growing vine, and it brought me even more joy than the original. This year, there is going to be much growth in our lives, more joy and more love. Having honoured the spring, all 24 Ostara eggs decorated, I stopped to admire and give gratitude for the gift of creation. I went to take a look at the willow branches in my little garden house. I had gathered them after storms in our area had blown down a whole bundle of them, and thought they'd be perfect for an Ostara egg tree. Now was the time I'd be finally creating my vision. But what could I use as a base? I thought. Then it suddenly came to me. I had an old silver pot that was extremely heavy, that was just lying around gathering dust. It wasn't looking its best, and so I decided, since I wouldn't ever be using it for tea again, to give it a new lick of silver paint. having decorated the teapot, it was time to put together the Ostara tree. One by one, I hung the 24 egg charms on the tree. Next, I would be crafting a little squirrel in an egg who would have the tail of an alder cone, as they so remind me of squirrels' tails and are a symbol of the season. The alder is one of the 25 trees of the Celtic tree Ogham, a tree sacred to the god Bran and a symbol of resurrection, which is perfect as all the spring flowers begin to bloom once again. The equinox marks a point of balance in the sun's yearly cycle. As day and night are approximately of equal length, we too should contemplate balance in our own lives. And so this is the perfect time to look to and learn from the wise squirrel. For in this creature we see the perfect embodiment of balance in work and play, which has many a time been a challenge in my life. I've always had an abundance of ideas flow to me, and in previous years I've often been so overwhelmed with them and all the different projects that I had started that I rarely finished them, often abandoning them due to psychological distress. Although I have learnt a lot since then and no longer live and work the way I used to, I often still need a reminder to calm the Capricorn workaholic in me, and I have found this in the squirrels, who constantly bring me messages from the divine. After family circumstances shifted last year, members moved out, and as more space was available for use, I moved my working laptop downstairs, where I could work on a table and also easily see the outdoors. It was at this time that my appreciation of the squirrel grew. With each passing day, my observation of the squirrel would serve as a reminder to me to not take work so seriously. With each occasion I glimpsed the squirrel, I would stop and take a break. Seeing the antics of the squirrel, it was almost like he demanded attention from me. There were times in his eager playfulness that he would jump onto the side of a pot not knowing it was empty, knocking it over and falling inside. He was never hurt, of course, for the squirrel is well equipped to adapt to sudden changes in situations. In my previous work in China, I would often find myself visiting the hospital due to extreme burnout. For me, it was a lose-lose situation, as at the time, hammering on through everything and putting on a smile for the outside world was a coping mechanism I'd clung to in order to just survive through the challenges and extreme anxiety I was experiencing at the time. Thankfully, those days are now past. However, many of us do at times have a tendency to accept stress as just a part of life, Capricorns more so, and though at times soldiering on through a stressful challenge can be useful, it can also be harmful when you fail to address the root of a persistent problem. This is where the squirrel has been very helpful to me. The squirrel always balances his hard-working gathering of nuts with a positive playfulness, never failing to get the job done. And with his adaptability to situations, like a falling pot or a breaking twig, his focus and mindfulness bring us an extra dose of self-awareness that can help us to identify and handle stress, reminding us to stay mindful and in the moment of our every activity. Contrast with the ebb of life is an inevitable and also extremely important and beneficial part of life as a human on this earthly plane. But a whole bunch of stress, not so much. So with this squirrel egg craft, I'm slowing down and focusing on the energies of the squirrel. For it is time to contemplate, to really tune in with ourselves and ask questions, examining balance in our own lives. Am I working too hard? Do I need to rest more? Or perhaps is it that I've been procrastinating and not working hard enough? Have I been spending too much time indoors since winter? Is it time to spend more time outdoors in nature? Perhaps even climbing a tree like a squirrel. Well, perhaps not quite like a squirrel. Have I been spending too much time alone? Is it time to perhaps meet up with a friend? Where am I off balance? And what can I change to return balance to that part of my life? Balance is so important in life. It's bringing things into harmony. It's not something that we can grasp at, but something that we continually do. Everything is in constant motion. The unexpected will happen. But like the squirrel on a broken branch, we can learn to adapt to the moment, bringing us back to equilibrium. This is something that only we can feel for ourselves, and would be best for us to not make comparisons to others with, for one should find the balance that they themselves enjoy. Let's be kind to ourselves and remember that every little change is a step in the right direction. I know this little squirrel creation definitely is a wonderful addition to my life. I am grateful for all the lessons and reminders the squirrels bring to my journey on Earth, and I hope this little one enjoys the eggshell home he shall reside in this spring. Next, I painted 3 broken shells and began making a bird's nest to hold them. These 3 shells only have a hole in the top, for they will be used to grow some seeds. With spring being the breeding season for most birds, this is the time they often build cozy nests to lay eggs and raise their young. Birds make their nests from all sorts of natural materials, and different kinds of birds will use different things depending on what's available in their habitat. It's fascinating to see all the different types of nests that birds can build just using materials found around them. They truly are wonderful creators. And at this time, while the trees and hedges are still bare of leaves, it's much easier to see birds. And if you're lucky enough, you may even be able to see some signs of actual nest building. I haven't yet, but I shall be on the lookout. Making your own bird's nest from items you have gathered yourself will help to attune with the season. Whilst I was out in the woods last week, I foraged materials for the construction of my magical nest. Some of the materials that the birds use include twigs, feathers, moss, and lichen. Personally, I'm not one to bring moss or lichen into the home, though I do like their aesthetics in the garden. In creating their nests, birds often begin by dropping sticks in a rather unruly way, onto a chosen portion of a tree branch, beginning to form a loose outline of a nest. I'm not sure I could make one this way, but I did have a try. Kind of just feels like divining with Ogham staves, though. Birds use their sharp beaks to bend and weave the fibers of their nest together. I don't have a beak, so I will just be using my hands. Apart from foraged items, I also allowed myself use of a bit of yarn or string, as birds do often come across such items that they may utilize. In the creation of their nests, birds rely on spider webs or mud to hold pieces together, and some birds even use their own saliva as a type of nest glue. I'm not one for too much mud, so I allowed myself use of a minimal amount of glue, visualizing myself as a little bird going about its task with love, utilizing its saliva to create a structurally strong and safe home for her children. Knowing all this, it's easy to see why nests symbolize life, growth, health, and family stability. It took longer than I thought it would to create the basic nest shape. Since I hadn't used any mud or moss, there were still quite a few gaps, and so I decided to weave in some ivy leaves. I then wove in some spring flowers. I also wove a flower chain to fill in the larger gaps. With nest complete, I added the 3 cracked eggs, imagining the baby birds had just hatched from their eggs. And there we have it. The nest is complete. Time to enjoy this creation. This spring equinox, tap into the energy of the squirrel. Be playful, have more fun, paint some eggs, get outdoors, build a nest, jump for joy, and live life to the full.
The moon, she dances like the waves on the shore, making circles like the waves on the shore.